There's something fascinating about people who grew up in the 1970s, and psychology can prove it. If you grew up in this era, your brain developed during a rare evolutionary window, a time of total freedom combined with genuine responsibility. And here's what's interesting. Most people who grew up in the 70s look at our current generation and just laugh. Not in a mean way, but because they know something the rest of us don't. They experience something that can never be recreated. A time so magical, so free, that decades later they still say things like, "I wish I could go back and stay there," or "We really didn't know how good we had it." To put it even perfectly, we grew up on hose water, we were feral, and it was glorious. So what made the 70s so special? And more importantly, what did it do to your brain that makes you different today? The first trait is what researchers call self-directed problem solving, and it started with one phrase every 70s kid remembers: "Go find something to do," or "I'll find something for you to do." You knew exactly what that meant. If you dared say you were bored, suddenly you were folding clothes or sweeping floors. So you learned fast. Figure it out yourself. Studies on unstructured childhood show that children who had to create their own entertainment developed significantly stronger executive function and creativity. You weren't handed activities. You weren't scheduled. You had to create your whole day from scratch. Nothing was planned for you. That is why you tore through books, rode your bike for hours with no destination, or disappeared into the woods building forts until the sun went down. You can honestly say to yourself, "I was never bored." You read constantly or stayed outside exploring, and you loved having that freedom. Without realizing it, your brain learns something many modern childhoods never get the chance to learn: how to create meaning out of empty time. That explains your creativity, but it does not fully explain why you stay so calm when everything around you is falling apart. That calm comes from another trait you developed early on: adaptive risk judgment. You grew up climbing trees that were clearly too tall, riding bikes with no helmets, throwing rocks at each other, and lighting fireworks just to see what would happen. You can laugh and say that was our version of the internet. Every scraped knee, every small disaster, every close call trained your nervous system. Developmental psychology research shows that children who played with real physical risk grew into adults with better danger awareness and lower everyday anxiety. Your brain learned the difference between true danger and manageable risk by experiencing it firsthand, not by watching it on a screen or having an adult step in immediately. You broke bones, you collected scars, and honestly, those felt like badges of honor, each one tied to a story. That is why, when a crisis hits, you tend to stay steady and start fixing things while everyone else panics. But there is something even deeper, and this is the part most of Generation Z will never truly understand. You carry what researchers call a strong capacity for comfortable solitude. You spent long hours alone in your room listening to music. You lay in the grass just talking with friends, with no rush to be anywhere else. You explored by yourself, not because you were lonely, but because there was nothing constantly demanding your attention every few seconds. Studies on childhood before digital connectivity show that people raised without constant screens experience much less anxiety when left alone with their thoughts. In fact, modern experiments found that many people would rather receive mild electric shocks than sit quietly for 15 minutes. You would probably find that idea absurd. You learned early that boredom is not a crisis. Back then, you understood something simple and powerful. As a kid, you could always find something to do, and being bored was never something to fear. Your brain never got hooked on nonstop stimulation the way modern life demands. That is why you can stand in a long line without losing your temper. The fourth trait is something psychologists often describe as analog patience, and it shaped you more than you probably realize. You waited a full week for your favorite television show. There was no binge watching. You took photos on film and waited days to find out if they came out right. If you wanted to talk to someone, you memorized their phone number and hoped they were home when you called. Research on delayed gratification shows that people who grew up waiting for things develop stronger impulse control, healthier relationships, and better long-term career outcomes. Your entire childhood quietly trained patience in a way modern life actively erases. That is why instant gratification does not satisfy you the way it does for younger generations. And this leads to the trait that connects everything together. You have what I call unsupervised autonomy wiring. At 8 years old, you left the house in the morning, and the only rule was to be home before the streetlights came on. Nobody knew exactly where you were. Nobody tracked your location. You rode your bike to creeks far outside town. You played deep in the woods. You wandered into neighborhoods nowhere near home, and a stranger might even offer you lemonade or sandwiches after a full day of playing in the water. Today, that would probably lead to police calls. Back then, it was normal. Research on childhood independence shows that kids who had freedom of movement without constant supervision developed stronger internal motivation and better decision-making skills. You had to read situations, make judgment calls, and live with the consequences. Your parents were not your friends. They were the authority, and they trusted you to handle yourself. That is why you can plan, adapt, and think critically without needing constant guidance. So when you look at the world today and feel out of place, remember this: you are not outdated. You are carrying skills that are slowly disappearing. The independence that looks like emotional distance is actually competence. The comfort with silence that looks antisocial is depth. The ability to wait that looks like apathy is discipline. You survived a childhood that would get parents arrested today, and it did not break you. It built you. Most people who lived it say they feel honored to have grown up that way. Others say they lived through the best decade to be a kid, and they are right. For a short moment in human history, childhood was both completely free and deeply formative. You experienced something that no longer exists, a world where kids were civilized and wild at the same time. Drop a comment if you were a 1970s kid and believe it was the best era to grow up. And if you enjoy research-based content like this that explains who you really are, subscribe, because we are just getting started.